Joining me now is Democratic Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island. He is the top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee. He's been briefed on these allegations. And I guess just to start, Senator, do you believe what you've seen up to this point, which I know you can't talk about at length, but do you believe it was a hoax?
I believe that the intelligence community was concerned that the Russians were plotting or involved somewhat with Afghan elements to go after our forces. Whether they reached high confidence, that's something else. But this was real enough to be discussed at the National Security Council. It's real enough to alert our allies to protect their own forces. And anytime there's a threat to U.S. forces, the President of the United States should be made aware of it. That's why I find this very, very difficult to believe that he was never told, no one bothered to tell him. And in addition, there is some suggestion that it was included in the presidential daily briefing, that it was written down there. One of the problems, I think, with the president is that he doesn't always read the presidential daily briefing, that it's sort of hit and miss with this intelligence. But when it comes to intelligence with respect to the welfare and safety of security of our American fighting men and women, that's something the president should demand to know about immediately. And if I was the president, I'd be upset with my staff and not informing me.
Senator, you have a kind of a granular knowledge of U.S. force posture around the world. This is something you would think the administration would take steps to protect U.S. forces in Afghanistan. Obviously, they warned U.S. allies. Have you seen anything that shows that on the ground, U.S. commanders were given this information and told to prepare to keep U.S. troops protected based on what the intelligence community knew?
Secretary Esper has indicated that he directed that all reasonable precautions be taken with respect to the potential of this incident happen, of GRU, Russian intelligence agents paying Afghanis to attack U.S. forces. We have heard incidents in the past. In 2018, there were reports from Afghanistan that Russians were providing weapons and money to Taliban elements. So this has been a very confused and complicated situation. My hope, and I think it has some credibility, is that local commanders certainly, when they heard this information, took steps, because they have an intimate and direct responsibility for the protection of their forces.
Can I ask, how does this slot into the broader administration policy on Afghanistan? Obviously, there's peace talks, there's ceasefires, there's Russia is in and around all of these things. It's very complicated, but what's your sense of how this kind of fits in with the broader U.S.-Afghanistan situation at the moment?
Well, unfortunately, I think the president is trying to find a way out quickly, prior perhaps even to the election, and doing so without making sure that we have a credible counterterrorism force in place. That would be a mistake. I think the other problem we have here is any relationship with Russia is always complicated. You know, ironically, he said this was just a hoax. Guess what the Russian spokesperson said? It's a hoax. The president has been very, very amenable to the Russians. He wants them to come into the G7. He had this information, apparently, at least it was in his presidential daily brief, and yet he had 5 conversations with President Putin, and I don't think in any one time did he even raise this issue or potential or even a suggestion that we have to be much more appropriate in our relationships in Afghanistan. And then finally, it's unrelated to Afghanistan, but withdrawing forces from Germany is again another, I think, great gift to Putin. And that's something the president is doing despite our allies in NATO, despite the NATO alliance. So all these things suggest that when it comes to not just Afghanistan, but when it comes to Russia, the president deals in a very unique way, and it's very, very amenable to the Russians. He seems to not be able to do enough for Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, I want to get to a domestic economic issue in a second, but I do have to ask, since you were the co-author of the National Defense Authorization Act, must-pass bill, every year it gets done, it's always bipartisan. The president has threatened to veto it because of a 3-year commission study into changing the names of Confederate bases named after Confederate generals. Some Republicans have told me, look, Democrats will negotiate on this. It's a must-pass. Do you plan to negotiate based on the provision you have in your bill right now?
We have a bipartisan position. It passed the Senate Armed Services Committee on a bipartisan basis. It came to the floor. It is part of our bill. I assume it'll be part of the House bill. And I think we will go ahead and pass the legislation. Again, I can't emphasize enough, it was bipartisan. It came out because I think people do recognize that we had an important moment in which to put history right, if you will. We have a situation now where we have military posts and that are named for individuals who actually waged warfare against the United States. And I think we've finally come to recognize that's not the best image to have. And we provided a 3-year process by which local communities, the military itself, military historians can weigh in and select an appropriate name. Today, when you go to a military base, it is composed of Americans from all races, from men and women, all striving together. And to have those bases named very deliberately after someone who fought against the United States for the expansion and for the preservation of slavery is, I think, inappropriate. And we're going to change that.
Yeah, certainly seems that way. Senator Reid, we are out of time. I have unemployment insurance questions and state and local questions, but I'm going to get those to you in the hallways next time I see you. And enjoy your 4th of July weekend. Thank you very much for your time. All right, up next.